Hi everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to share with you how I made this pop-up card with Joy Clair Stamps. Before I get started, I want to share with you that this card is for the December challenge for Joy Clair Stamps. Here's the inspiration photo for this month, and also it has a theme of make it pop up, dimension, or anything goes. There are also a few more rules. You just need to make a card or project using the photo as inspiration and an anything goes or pop-up dimension theme. Post your project on your blog or online gallery and link to the Joy Clair blog. And though we like to see Joy Clair stamps, you can use any brand. A few other things, you must link directly to the Joy Clair blog. Your projects must be new. You can enter as many projects as you want. All you need to do is add a direct link to the end links on the Joy Clair blog. I will leave that link in the description box below. So now that that's all covered, let's move on to the card. Here's a list of supplies that I used, so if you want to grab these products, you can make this card along with me, or you can reference back here if you have any questions. So starting off, I did a lot of work off camera just because this is such an in-depth card. I went ahead and stamped, fussy cut, and colored in all of my images beforehand. Now these are from the Christmas Nativity stamp set, and if you're not in the mood to fussy cut, Joy Clair Stamps does offer free SVG files for all of their stamps, so if you have an electronic cutting machine, you can go that route. Here's a look at the stamp set that I used. I stamped all those little images with some black dye ink and colored them in. Now I have two panels here that are A2 sized white cardstock that I'm going to be making a night sky on. Now these are going to be my front and inside panels, so I need two of them, and I just went ahead and made them A2 size. I will cut one of them down, but I wanted the whole thing just to make sure that I had enough. Now what I'm doing here is just blending on some distressing. This is not a careful process. I don't need to start off really light. I don't need to worry about getting those harsh lines because the majority of this is going to be covered up. So I'm using hickory smoke, some dusty concord, and black soot. Or maybe it's seedless preserves. It's one of the two purples I know that I'm using. Just a purple color. You could also switch this up and use some navy blue in there if you wanted to. I just happen to like the way the purple looks better. So I'm switching back and forth between these three colors, mostly the hickory smoke and the purple color first, and then I'll come in with my last color, which is that black soot, and basically just cover up the majority of all that work that I've done. That underneath is going to pop through in a few places, and also later on when I go and splatter a little bit of water over this, it's going to pull up some of that color and reveal colors underneath. So it's a really nice effect and very simple and easy and quick to do, especially when I'm doing two of these panels. I'm only going to show you one today because this exact same process I did over on the other panel as well. I'm not worried about that bottom inch or so. On the front panel, it's going to be covered, and on the inside panel, I'm going to chop it off. So I just use that to kind of hold everything in place so I don't have to get a scrap piece of paper out. Once I had both of those panels covered, I'm going to use my spray bottle. I'm going to take the nozzle out and use the end of that to splatter on some water droplets. Now, distress ink is reactive with water, so I'm going to let this sit for a minute. Then whenever I come in with a dry towel, cloth, whatever you have on hand, and soak this up, that's going to pick up that color and leave some lighter spots. Now that's great if you want to leave it that way and have your sky that nice soft subtle stars, but I want to kind of kick this up a notch. So I took some white acrylic paint, I've got it on an acrylic block, and I am going to just use the edge of that acrylic block and a paintbrush to splatter on some stars. Now this creates some stripes, almost like shooting stars is what it looks like. If you want to get dots, go ahead and pick your paintbrush up and just tap on it with your finger, and that will leave little speckles of white paint. If it's too thick, you can also dilute your acrylic paint with some water. It really is just kind of a feel how it's going situation. Now I needed to let those dry for a few minutes, so I did some die cutting. I've got a hill border die. This is from the fall border die set that I have, but any hill border will do. This is just the one I happen to have. So I went ahead and ran that through my die cutting machine 4 times with black cardstock. Now, I also have 2 pieces of vellum here that I'm going to use a scallop border on. This is basically what I'm going to use as clouds, so any cloud border will do. Now I need to get my pop-up element ready for the inside of my card. So I've got a piece of 5.5. I actually cut just about 1/8 of an inch off on one side, so it's slightly smaller. And then I cut it down to about 3 inches. Now I'm going to go ahead, or 2 3/4 inches actually. Now I'm going to take my bone folder and start making score lines. Now from each side, I'm going to come in 1/4 of an inch. This is going to be where I attach adhesive to attach the pop-up element to the inside of my card. Then I'm going to move that right side down 1 inch and make a score line right down the center. Now I need to go ahead and really get those score lines nice and creased in there. And I just do that by folding and really pressing with my bone folder. Now this is not a card that you can skimp on the folding at all, and those creases, they need to be really nice and tight, so whenever you go and you try and fold this down, everything's going to fold up very nicely. If there's any trouble or kind of resistance at all, it's just not going to work out. So make sure you take the time to go ahead and pre-fold this, and then you can go ahead and stick it inside your card. And it doesn't take too much time, just a nice crease, and then it's ready to go on the inside of the card. Now I like to use dry adhesive here. You can use wet. I just find it a little bit harder to hold everything together while it's drying. So I just put 2 strips of score tape on those folds that I made, and then I fold them back onto the top and bottom panels of the inside of the card. Now I can go ahead and fold up that card, and if I was off even a little bit, this is going to go ahead and give me, I was off a little bit here, this is going to give me that opportunity to kind of fold everything into place. Then I can run my bone folder over that card and really get it nice and tight where it needs to be. So it's going to fold down. You can see I'm pressing very firmly here once I have everything in place, running my bone folder over the top of that just to make sure that everything is going to fold up whenever I go and close this. You need to get the card panel done first, the actual card base done first. Make sure it folds, make sure everything will go together, then start adding your elements so you don't have to go back and rework all of those elements that you worked so hard on to create. The card base, once it's out of the way and you know it's going to fold up right, everything will come together perfectly. So on the inside of this card, I'm going to put together a little scene that when it opens and pops up, everybody's standing there. It's got a nice night sky behind it. And I'm also going to add a few floating elements too. I'll show you how I did that in just a moment. But the first thing I'm starting off with is one of those night sky panels that I created. I'm going to put some score tape on the back. I've measured and cut this. You don't want it to be too far down close to that pop-up element. If anything touches that or kind of gets in the way while it's trying to close, the card won't close properly. So every time I go in and I add an element, I make sure that it's going to close before I move on to the next one. So here you can see before I even glued it down, I went ahead and checked it, made sure everything would close with it in its position. Then I went in, added adhesive onto the back and placed it right on the it's actually the front panel of the card base on the underside of that. Now you can see I'm closing up here to make sure that everything closes up nicely with my clouds and also my hill borders. Make sure everything fits inside it, the card base, and everything folds down nicely and nothing's hanging out over the sides. And then once I know that everything fits properly, I can go in with my adhesive. Again, I'm using score tape here. I just like the quickness of it, but you can of course use some wet adhesive like Glossy Accents, Multi-Medium Matte. They dry fairly quickly. I just get a little bit impatient on cards like this. So I peeled off the backing paper and I did add my adhesive straight onto the actual pop-up panel on the inside. Then I'll place my vellum sheet right down where I want it. Then I just pick it up with that wet adhesive. I also attach the hill borders the exact same way, and I'm kind of letting them float. You can see on the top they're not connected. Now I needed somewhere to add all of my little elements, all of my little people, and a grounding effect as well. So I took 1-inch strip of white cardstock, added some mustard seed and vintage photo distress ink, and then I'm taking some yellow, kind of golden brown colors and creating all these little stripes on the card with just little flicks of my wrist. This is going to be a nice, kind of resembles hay on my card. You could use real hay if you wanted to. Carrie from the Joy Clair Stamps design team actually did that on one of her cards with this stamp set. I will leave a link to that blog post down below. It is adorable how it turned out, and just a really creative and neat idea. So I am using this as kind of my grounding position for all of my little elements here. And the first thing I want to do is set up my little stable right in the center of the card. So I use the 2 shorter pieces here. I attach them first, and then I come in with those longer pieces that are the roof, and I cross those in an X on the top to make them a little bit shorter. Now I need to go ahead and add all of my little people here. And I'm just kind of trying to get an idea of where I want everything to go. So the first thing I put down was a little shepherd and his staff on the right-hand side. And then I will be using a mixture of glossy accents on some of the pieces to attach them directly to that back panel. And then I'll also be using some dimensional adhesive to pop some of the little objects up, just to give it a little bit more interest, a little bit more of a realistic look, and just that added extra dimension, especially when I have all of these elements going on. It just kind of helps separate everything a little bit. So I popped up the cow and the little sheep over by the shepherd. Then I put the 3 wise men on the left-hand side. 2 I attached straight to that panel. And then the front one I popped up with dimensional adhesive. And then I have Mary and Joseph and little baby Jesus that I attached all with dimensional adhesive. Now you'll see off to the side I still have my angel and the little star, and I'm going to float those above the clouds, and I'll show you how I did that in just a moment. The first thing I need to do is go ahead and attach my little panel. You can see I've got a little bit of that stable sticking out from the top. That's okay. I just didn't double check before I put it on. Just make sure you do and everything goes together. A little bit doesn't bother me. If it was way over the top coming out, I probably would have taken it off and started over. But just check before you put it on. Now, like I said before, I wanted to add in that angel and that star, but I wanted it to be floating above everybody. So I cut a few strips of clear acetate here. You can use stamp packaging, whatever you have on hand. I'm going to attach that to the back of the angel and the star, and then I can place those in, kind of stick them down, and I am checking to make sure everything's going to fit inside the card. They did hang out a little bit, but it was okay for these because they're so far above, there really wasn't any getting around it. And I wanted them to have that appearance of really being high above everybody else. So I cut those down to the right size. I'm going to add a little bit more adhesive on the bottom of those pieces of acetate. Then I'll peel off the backing paper on both of them and kind of tuck them in right where the clouds and the hills are, so they're floating above everyone else. And all it needs is a little pinch right behind those hills, and that's where it's attaching to, are those hills. And then it can just float right above there. Now, if you do need to move these at all, acetate does come off pretty easily. Once it's stuck down for a good amount of time, it won't, but if you get it right when you put it down, you can move these around a little bit. Now, the angel I'll put on the right-hand side, and there we have it. You can see they stick out a little bit, but that's okay with these. Now, I added a craft panel on the bottom there. I thought the white was a little plain, so I dressed it up with the craft panel, and on that craft panel, I used the Born as the King stamp set to stamp and white and heat emboss on that. I also used that same sentiment set on the front. The front I cut very simple, so it's kind of very simple and plain, and then you open it up and it's like bam on the inside. So I did the same exact layout on the front with the sky, the clouds, and the hill border. I stamped A Child is Born, white heat embossed on that, and then on the inside I stamped Come Let Us Adore Him from that same stamp set, white heat embossed on that as well. And that completed the card for today. It was a little bit more in depth today, but as long as you get that pop-up portion right on the inside and just kind of double check it before you add any of your elements, this is super easy to do. I was very intimidated by even starting one of these cards, But once I started it and started putting all of my elements together, it came together fairly quickly and really easily as well. So I would highly suggest trying one of these. If you are intimidated by it, just start. It actually comes together pretty easily. There's a look at the front of that card as well as the inside. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. There are a few finished pictures coming up. It is a little bit hard to take photos of this kind of card, but I hope you get the sense of how fun it is in real life. And don't forget that this is part of the Joy Clair Stamps December Challenge. Now, you don't have to make an in-depth card like this like I did. Just add a little dimension here and there, make it pop, use that inspiration photo, and go and enter a card of your own. There are some great prizes to be had. Here are those last few finished photos to give you a better look at the card. And finally, here are a few different links you can click on. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching today, and happy crafting.